Today I will share with you a story that began on a Christmas morning when I reached for the one thing of my late husband's I still held close. His Montblanc pen was more than an object to me. It was the last trace of his presence. But that morning, it was gone. A message from my daughter appeared on my phone, short and sharp. She wrote, "It's sold. I needed the money for our island feast." Hours later, still reeling, I called the pawn shop, hoping to retrieve it. The man's voice carried a weight I did not expect. He said, "Ma'am, you need to see this." From that moment, everything in my life began to change, though I could not yet imagine how deeply. If you have ever held on to something small that carried the weight of someone you lost, you will understand why this story matters. And if you believe that the dignity of our lives deserves to be remembered, then stay with me. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. These are grandma life stories, told not only to pass time, but to hold on to the lessons that matter. My name is Amanda. I am 63 years old. My home is a small house in the suburbs of Seattle. People drive by without noticing it. There is nothing remarkable from the outside. But for me, every corner holds a memory. The porch where David once sat on summer nights with his guitar. The kitchen where I tried, and sometimes failed, to recreate my mother's recipes. The living room lined with books we collected, each carrying the scent of another time. My days now are quiet, perhaps too quiet. I wake with the morning light pressing through pale curtains, the hum of distant traffic faint in the background. I move through my room slowly, like someone protecting fragile glass. I brew tea, the whistle of the kettle sharp in the silence. I pour it carefully, not wanting to spill a drop, then sit by the window, watching the clouds shift above the rooftops. But one ritual matters more than all the others. On my desk there is a small wooden box, its lid worn smooth from years of use. Inside lies the Montblanc Meisterstück 149. To the untrained eye, it is simply a pen. But when I open the box and lift it out, the air changes. It has a weight that feels different, almost alive, as though it carries David's touch still. I clean it gently, with a soft cloth, the way he used to. I twist its mechanism, hear the faint click, and watch as ink fills the reservoir. Then I open my leather notebook. The pages are filled with fragments, quotes David once loved, phrases from books we shared, my own scattered thoughts when the loneliness becomes too heavy. This morning ritual is not about writing something perfect. It is about remembering. David always said, "A pen is not only for writing, but for thinking." He believed that when ink met paper, it slowed the chaos of the mind and gave shape to what mattered most. When I write with this pen, I feel him steadying me, and yet on the same desk, beside the notebook and pen, lies a different weight. Bills. They are stacked neatly, but I cannot look at them without my chest tightening. Hospital fees from David's last months, numbers that seem impossible for me alone to carry. I touch the envelope, tracing its lines with a finger, as if by doing so I could erase what is written inside. My throat tightens as I fold it back into the pile. David used to prepare for every possibility. He would say, "Plan for the storm even on the sunniest day." I would laugh sometimes, telling him he worried too much. He would smile, not arguing, just looking out the window at the sky. I did not understand then how right he was. I did not realize that once he was gone, I would be the one left in the middle of the storm. The house feels different now. The walls are lined with photographs, each one a reminder of a life I can never return to. David standing beside me on the pier in Maine, the wind in his hair. Clara as a little girl, clutching his hand at the zoo, her eyes wide with wonder. Our anniversary dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant, the candlelight flickering between us. I polish the frames, keep the dust away, but the silence clings. It is inescapable. Neighbors pass by sometimes, wave politely, but they do not see what I hold inside. They cannot know that every morning this pen is the only anchor I have left. Without it, I fear I might drift too far from myself. It is not about money or possessions or appearances. It is about holding on to the last tangible link to a man who gave his life to protect, to work, to love. So I keep this ritual. Tea, books, the pen, and I breathe. It may seem small, almost invisible to others, but to me, it is survival. Yet even as I cling to these routines, I can feel the storm gathering outside. I can feel the weight of choices pressing closer. I cannot yet see how deeply my life will change, but I know the threads are tightening. Something waits on the horizon. When I think back to that Christmas morning, when the pen was suddenly gone, I realize now it was the beginning of a road I never expected to walk. Betrayal, discovery, justice, all of it lay ahead of me. But on that morning, all I felt was the silence of my home, the absence of David's presence, and the sound of my own breath as I whispered his name. David had worried about the storms. He was right. And I, left with only his pen and my memories, had no choice but to step into the rain. Clara and Victor arrived that afternoon without warning, their presence filling the doorway with a chill colder than the December wind outside. I had just set the Montblanc pen back in its wooden box when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Clara draped in a tailored coat that seemed more suited for a runway than a visit to her mother's modest home. She carried herself as if every eye in the world was upon her, chin high, hair perfectly styled, perfume sharp and deliberate. Behind her was Victor, leaning to one side, a smirk tugging at his lips, as though he had already judged everything inside before he even crossed the threshold. "Mother," Clara said, sweeping past me as though my house belonged to her. "We had a few minutes before our dinner reservation, so we thought we'd stop by." She spoke quickly, her words like sharp glass wrapped in velvet. She didn't ask to come in. She simply moved. Victor followed, his eyes flicking from the worn rug by the door to the old books stacked neatly on the shelves. He chuckled under his breath, not words, just a sound of disdain. I closed the door quietly and turned. Clara was already at my table, running a manicured finger over the pile of bills, her smile tight. "Still keeping track of every penny, I see. Sometimes I wonder if you even know how to enjoy life. Money is meant to be spent, Mother. Experiences, travel, luxury, that's what people remember." She lifted her wrist, showing off a new diamond bracelet that caught the light deliberately. "Victor surprised me with this last week. Isn't it gorgeous?" Victor tilted his head, giving me a smile that felt more like a warning. "She deserves the best. Life's too short to live small, don't you think?" I said nothing at first. I moved to the desk, lifted the pen box, and held it against me. Clara's eyes caught the motion, and the gleam in her expression sharpened. She took a step closer, lowering her voice, though every word was meant to sting. "You still keep that pen? After all these years? Mother, honestly, it's ridiculous. A fancy pen collecting dust while you sit here alone, drowning in bills. Don't you think it would be smarter to let go? Sell it. Use the money for something that actually matters." Her tone was practiced, as though she had rehearsed these lines before walking through my door. Victor chuckled again, this time adding, "She's right, you know. It's just a pen. They make hundreds of them. We could buy you something nicer, something modern. You don't need that old thing." I looked down at the pen in my hands. My fingers tightened until my knuckles turned white. My throat burned, but I forced my voice to remain steady. "This is not just a pen." Clara laughed softly, a laugh that carried no warmth. "That's what you always say. You cling to the past as if it will bring him back. But it won't. Father is gone, and no object is going to change that." She tilted her head, studying me. "Sometimes I wonder if your memory is slipping, holding on to objects, talking to yourself in this house. Are you sure you're all right?" Victor's eyes narrowed. He added smoothly, "Clara worries about you, Amanda. She's afraid you might not be able to handle things anymore. Maybe it's time to think about letting us help. We know what's best." I met his gaze, cold and unflinching. "Help?" I repeated the word slowly, tasting the poison behind it. "Yes," Clara said quickly, stepping in. "Help. By making sure you're comfortable, by making sure you don't have to stress over silly things like bills or pens. You shouldn't be alone making these kinds of decisions." The way she said decisions struck me like a knife. She wasn't here to help. She was here to test the ground, to see how far she could push, how much she could take. I straightened my shoulders and placed the pen back in its box with deliberate care. Your father carried this pen every day of his life. He signed contracts with it. He wrote letters to me with it. He scribbled notes late at night when he thought no one was watching. This pen is worth more than your bracelet, more than your vacations, more than all the things you claim to treasure. It is not for sale. For the first time, Clara's smile cracked. A flicker of irritation crossed her face, quickly replaced with that same polished grin. Mother, don't be dramatic. You're exhausting yourself with sentimentality. Let me take care of it for you. You'll feel better when it's gone. Victor leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper, though sharp enough to cut. You'll feel lighter without it. Free. Isn't that what you want? I stood silent, clutching the wooden box to my chest. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. They looked at me as if I were fragile, as if they were already rehearsing how they would explain me to others. The widow, the poor old woman who could not let go. Tears stung at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. My silence was louder than their words. I wanted them to know that no matter how many times they pressed, no matter how cruel their laughter became, I would not yield. Clara sighed dramatically, reaching for her coat. We don't have time for this. Victor, let's go. Mother will come around eventually. She always does. She kissed the air near my cheek, her perfume overwhelming. Think about what I said. It's just a pen. Victor gave one last look around the room, his smirk widening. Nice place, Amanda. Cozy. Shame it's drowning in the past. The door closed behind them, the echo of their presence lingering like smoke in the air. I stood frozen, the weight of the Montblanc heavy in my hands, their voices replayed in my head, each word a dagger. Just a pen, just the past, just a widow. I pressed the box to my chest and whispered to the silence, They don't understand. They will never understand. And in that moment, I realized something had shifted. Their visit was not casual. It was deliberate. They had come not to see me, but to measure me, to decide how much longer I could stand on my own. They had left with nothing but disdain in their eyes. Yet I knew, deep inside, when Clara and Victor finally moved toward the door, there was no warmth in their departure. Clara adjusted her coat as if shaking off the dust of my home. Victor glanced over his shoulder with that same crooked smile, eyes sharp and watchful. Clara kissed the air near my cheek again, her perfume clinging to me like a stain. Think about what I said, Mother. You'll see it's the smart choice, she murmured, then slipped outside. Victor added in his low, grating tone, Don't hold on to something that's only dragging you down. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was heavier than any storm. I stood still for a moment, clutching the wooden box. My chest rose and fell as I tried to steady my breath. Something about their visit lingered like a warning, a shadow stretching longer than it should. I set the box carefully back on the table, telling myself I would not let them rattle me. They had always been dismissive, always chasing things they could show off. But David's pen was safe. It had to be. The room seemed quieter after they left, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I turned to fix the teacup on the counter, wiped a spot that wasn't even there. And when I returned to the table, my heart stopped. The wooden box was still there, lid closed, perfectly in place. But when I opened it, the pen was gone. A sharp gasp escaped my throat. My hands trembled as I lifted the empty box, flipping it over, searching corners that were already bare. No, it couldn't be. I dropped to my knees, pulling open drawers, pushing aside books, moving cushions, checking under the rug. Every second that passed, panic tightened around me like a rope. My breathing grew ragged, my pulse thundered in my ears. Where is it? I whispered, voice breaking. Where is it? I tore through the living room, moved to the bedroom, opened the dresser, checked the nightstand. My fingers scraped across wood, pulling open every drawer until they clattered against the stops. The pen was nowhere. It was as if it had been erased from the house entirely. A surge of fury cut through the fear. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and typed Clara's name. My fingers stabbed the screen. The message was short, sharp, fueled by fire. Where is David's pen? I waited, pacing, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. Seconds felt like hours. Then the phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen. Clara's words sliced me open. "It's sold. We needed the money for Hawaii. It's just a pen, Mother." I stared at the glowing letters until my vision blurred. My thumb hovered, shaking. Then I hit call. The line rang twice before her voice, smooth and cold, filled my ear. "Oh, Mother," she said, almost bored. "You're upset. Over that pen?" "You had no right," I snapped, my voice rising. "That pen was your father's. It was the last piece of him I had. How could you—" Clara cut me off, her tone hardening. "Listen to yourself. You're clinging to nonsense. It's a pen. A pen, Mother. Victor and I needed money for our trip, and frankly, it was just lying around. You don't need it. You should thank us for doing something practical." "Practical?" My voice shook, not from weakness, but from rage. "That pen carried 40 years of his life. You sold it like it was nothing." Victor's voice suddenly broke in from the background, louder than Clara, mocking. "She's making a scene again? Tell her it's just an object. We'll buy her something newer when we get back." Then he laughed, the sound hollow, cruel. Clara returned, her words dripping with scorn. "See, we're not the villains here. You're the one who refuses to move on. Father is gone, Mother. You can't keep living in the past. If you keep holding on to dead weight, you'll never survive." My knees gave way, and I sank into the chair by the window. The phone pressed hot against my ear, my chest rising in shallow gasps. I whispered, half to myself, half to the empty room, "You didn't sell a pen. You sold my memories. You sold my husband." Clara's tone cooled even more, as if I were nothing but an inconvenience. "We don't have time for this. Our flight's in the morning. Try to rest, Mother. We'll talk when we're back." And then the line went dead. The silence returned, louder than before. I lowered the phone slowly, my hand trembling so violently I nearly dropped it. My reflection in the window looked older, smaller, as if Clara's words had carved years into my face. But beneath the despair, a different fire began to burn. They thought they could erase David with one careless act. They thought they could strip away my strength along with his pen. But I knew better. Betrayal has a sound, sharp and metallic, like pennies pressed against the tongue. And in that moment, I tasted it fully. I pressed my hands flat against the table to steady myself. My voice, low and steady, filled the silence of the room. "They believe they've won, but they have no idea what they've started." The night closed in around me, shadows deepening on the walls. My heart still ached, but the trembling was gone. My grief was no longer weakness, it was armor. The morning after the call, I stepped outside with eyes that burned from a sleepless night. My hands shook as I clutched the empty wooden box against my chest. The air was damp and heavy, Seattle's winter drizzle coating the streets like a gray veil. As I locked the door, Mrs. Patterson from next door called out to me, holding her grocery bag close under her arm. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Amanda, I didn't want to say anything yesterday, but I saw Victor leaving your house. He was carrying a wooden box, looked like it had some weight to it. He shoved it into the trunk of his car before Clara called him inside." Her words hit me harder than the cold. My knees nearly gave way. I whispered, "It was David's." Mrs. Patterson's face softened with pity, but she turned away, unwilling to be caught in the middle. I could see it in her eyes. She had already judged, already decided that Clara and Victor were the strong ones, and I was the fragile old widow. That sting only sharpened my resolve. I took the bus downtown, the city rushing past in a blur of rain-slick streets and neon signs. My grip tightened around the photograph in my pocket. David smiling outside a small pawn shop years ago. The very shop he had once told me was a place of honest transactions. That memory guided me through the damp streets until the faded sign appeared before me. Lee's Pawn and Loan. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The shop smelled of metal, dust, and desperation. A man behind the counter barely glanced up. His hair was peppered gray, his arms covered in faded tattoos. His name tag read simply, Mr. Lee. His expression was flat, eyes dulled from too many sad stories. "I'm looking for something," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "A Montblanc pen, black, gold trim, engraved." Without looking up from his ledger, he muttered, "Lady, I see 100 items come through here every day. Pens, watches, rings. They all look the same." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "This one belonged to my husband. He passed away. That pen, it's all I have left." He shrugged. "I don't remember. Business is business." A wave of frustration surged through me. I stepped closer, my palms pressing flat against the counter. "Please, I'm not asking for charity, just a little effort. My son-in-law brought it here. I need to know what happened to it." For the first time, Mr. Lee raised his eyes to mine. They were tired eyes, practiced at ignoring pain. He studied me as though weighing whether my story was worth his time. His lips pressed into a thin line. "I told you, hundreds of people walk through that door. I don't keep track." I pulled the photograph from my pocket and slid it across the glass. In it, David stood smiling, holding a violin he had once pawned to cover a bill before buying it back months later. Mr. Lee frowned, picking up the photo. His eyes lingered on David's face. I saw something flicker in his expression, recognition. "That was years ago," he muttered, softer now. "Yes," I said quickly, seizing the moment. "David trusted this shop. He trusted you. Please, that pen meant everything to him, and to me." He hesitated, then shook his head, as though shaking off weakness. "Look, lady, I can't just pull records for anyone. My time isn't free." I reached into my purse and laid 2 crisp bills on the counter. "Then let me pay for your time. Just check." His fingers drummed against the glass. He stared at the bills, then at me, then at the photo again. Finally, with a grunt, he disappeared into the back room. The minutes stretched, the ticking clock on the wall echoing in my ears like thunder. When he returned, he carried a thin ledger. He flipped it open, scanning lines of cramped handwriting until he stopped. His jaw tightened. "Victor," he read aloud. "Brought in a Montblanc, black resin, gold trim. Sold it for 600 cash." I closed my eyes. My chest ached as though the words themselves had weight. Mr. Lee cleared his throat. "But here's the thing. It didn't stay here long. A man came in, asked specifically about recent Montblancs, paid cash, no name, no questions, walked out with it." My eyes flew open. "So it's gone? Just gone?" He exhaled heavily and reached under the counter. "Not entirely." He pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age. When I examined the pen to appraise it, I found this tucked inside a hidden compartment. I was going to throw it away, but something told me to keep it. My hands shook as I took the envelope. Inside was a tiny slip of paper, creased and fragile, with a string of letters and numbers written in David's careful script. SS 44457 CH0815 AS. I stared at the code, my breath catching. My voice came out as a whisper. "David, what did you hide inside that pen?" Mr. Lee leaned back, crossing his arms. "Look, I don't know what that means, but the guy who bought the pen, he seemed like he was expecting something. Asked questions about hidden compartments. Made me uneasy. Be careful, lady. Some things are better left buried." I clutched the slip of paper as if it were burning into my palm. My grief twisted into something sharper, something more dangerous. Betrayal had taken my husband's pen, but now I realized it had also opened a door David had meant for me to find. I turned without another word, the slip clutched tightly in my hand. The rain outside hit my face like needles, but I barely felt it. My husband had left me a trail, and I would follow it, no matter where it led. When I stepped back into my house that evening, the silence was so sharp it pressed against my ears. The rain had followed me home, tapping against the windows like a constant reminder of what I had lost. I dropped my coat over the chair, pulled the slip of paper from my pocket, and set it on the table. My hands trembled as though I were holding fire. The string of letters and numbers stared back at me. SS 44457 CH0815 AS. I whispered aloud, my voice cracking. David, what is this? What were you hiding? I spread out old photographs, bills, and notebooks across the table. I tried matching the numbers to anniversaries, to birthdays, to the house we first bought on 45th Street. Nothing fit. I tried our wedding date, the hospital records, even David's old employee ID. Each attempt fell into silence, a puzzle with no corner pieces. I pressed my palms against my temples, searching for a connection. SS. Could it be Social Security? CH. Chicago? No, we never lived there. We never lived. NS. Amanda Sullivan? Or is it something else? The possibilities tore at me like claws. I scribbled down every idea in my notebook, my writing frantic, the ink blotting into the paper. The clock ticked past midnight, the house groaning with the cold. I lit the small lamp on the desk, its light spilling over the cluttered table. I picked up the slip again, holding it close as if proximity would reveal its meaning. My breath fogged against it, and I whispered, David, you always had a plan. You always left me something to hold on to. Why does this feel like you left me in the dark? I pushed back from the table and stared out the window. The streets of Seattle stretched into the night, empty and slick with rain. A bus rolled past in the distance, its headlights cutting through the fog. I felt as though the world outside was moving, while I remained frozen in place, trapped with nothing but questions. I tried again, speaking aloud as if David were sitting across from me. CH0815. Could it be August 15th? That was our anniversary. You wrote it into the code, didn't you? And SS4457. But what does that mean? I clutched the paper tighter, anger rising in my chest. Why didn't you tell me? Why bury secrets in a pen while I sat beside you, trusting everything you said? My hands slammed against the table, rattling the empty teacup still resting there. The sound echoed in the room, startling me into stillness. I sank into the chair, breath heavy, the paper crushed between my fingers. For a long moment, I could only stare at the shadows crawling along the walls. Hours passed. I found myself pacing, moving from the living room to the kitchen and back again. I opened drawers, flipped through David's old ledgers, his diaries, his boxes of receipts. Nothing. The code remained an iron wall between us. At one point, I stumbled across a faded envelope marked in David's neat handwriting, insurance policies. My heart skipped, but when I opened it, I found only routine forms. No answers, no clues. The disappointment sank like a stone in my stomach. I sat back at the desk, the slip of paper in front of me once again. My fingers traced the numbers until they blurred. David, you left me alone to fight storms you knew were coming. You left me with riddles when I needed clarity. My voice dropped to a whisper. But I will not stop. Not this time. I thought of Clara and Victor, their smirks, their casual cruelty. I thought of the way Clara had looked at me, her words dripping with disdain. Do you ever forget things, Mother? She had planted the seed of doubt in everyone around me. They thought I was fragile, incapable, fading. My lips curled into something between a grimace and a vow. No, I muttered. I will not be their victim. Whatever this code is, it will be mine to uncover. And when I do, they will understand that David chose me, not them. The hours bled into the early morning. My tea had long gone cold, the ink in my notebook smudged from my restless hands. I wrapped myself in David's old sweater and sat by the window. Outside, the city was still cloaked in darkness. A street lamp flickered, casting long shadows that stretched across the lawn. I held the slip of paper in my palm, my fingers tightening around it until it nearly tore. My breath came out uneven. My reflection in the window looked older, harsher, but also steadier. For the first time since Clara's call, I felt the stirrings of something other than grief. It was sharper, colder. The pen was gone, yes. The memories they tried to strip from me could never be stolen. And now I had this code, a trail David had left behind, a sign that he trusted me to finish what he had started. I pressed the paper to my chest and whispered again, David, I don't know what you've done, but I will find out. And I will not let them bury me under their lies. The wind outside rattled the windows, carrying with it the chill of another long Seattle night, but inside, my resolve hardened. That night marked the first step into the unknown, into the dark corridors of secrets David had kept hidden, and the shadows Clara and Victor thought I was too weak to confront. I sat there until dawn, my hands still wrapped around the slip of paper, my eyes burning with exhaustion but refusing to close. When the first light broke over the horizon, I whispered to myself, "This is not the end, it is the beginning." When the knock came at my door that afternoon, I hesitated. My world had been shaking under me for days, and I no longer trusted who might be standing on the other side. When I opened it, I found Sophie. She stood there, clutching her backpack against her chest, her dark hair damp from the drizzle outside. She looked at me the way one studies an artifact, uncertain, cautious, curious. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice low. It was the first time she had visited alone. I nodded, forcing a tired smile. "Come in, Sophie." She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the house. Her father's influence was in her stance, Victor's sharp posture, his quick eyes, but her uncertainty belonged to her alone. She sat gingerly at the edge of the sofa. "I shouldn't stay long," she murmured. "Clara said you've been forgetful. She said you've been imagining things, and I just wanted to see for myself." Her words cut, though she didn't mean them as a knife. They were echoes of what Clara had planted in her mind. I looked at her, my chest tightening. "Forgetful," I repeated slowly. "That's what she tells you?" Sophie shifted in her seat. "She just worries about you. She said you keep holding on to old stuff that doesn't matter. Like some pen?" At that, I felt the tears sting. I turned away, walking toward the small writing desk. My hand shook as I picked up the slip of paper Mr. Lee had given me. "Your father's wife took that pen. She said it was worthless, but it was the last thing of David's I had left." My voice faltered. I pressed my hand against my mouth to steady it. When I faced Sophie again, my tears were already falling. For days, I had been fighting to keep strong, to stand tall against Clara and Victor. But now, in front of this girl who still had innocence in her eyes, my walls cracked. They didn't just take an object. They took a memory, a piece of him. And now, I held up the slip of paper. "Now I don't even know what this means." Sophie's expression softened. She dropped her bag on the floor and came closer. "Grandma, you're crying." I let out a bitter laugh. I thought I had no more tears left, but some wounds never dry. She reached for the slip of paper, studying it with care. Her brow furrowed, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "These aren't random numbers. I've seen formats like this before in my coding classes. It looks like some kind of identifier." I looked at her sharply. "You understand it?" "Not completely," she admitted. "But it's not nonsense. It means something. Maybe it's connected to accounts or files or something hidden." She met my eyes. "Let me help you." I shook my head. "Clara will hate that. She's already poisoned you against me. She will never forgive you if she knows you're helping." Sophie straightened, her voice firm for the first time. "I don't care. I know she lies. I've seen the way she talks about you when she thinks no one's listening. She says you're old, that you don't matter. But sitting here now, I don't believe her anymore." Her words cut through me, but this time like sunlight through fog. I placed the slip back in her hand. "Then we'll do this together. Whatever David left, whatever truth lies in this code, we'll find it." Sophie sat beside me at the desk. Her presence was like a fragile light in a dark room. She pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "I can run some checks, but we'll also need to think like him. What numbers mattered to Grandpa? Birthdays? Anniversaries? Work IDs?" I nodded slowly. "August 15th, our wedding anniversary. July 14th, the day we met. And his father's death in 1981. He never forgot that." Sophie typed each suggestion, the glow of the screen reflecting in her determined eyes. "We'll figure it out. Don't lose hope, Grandma." For the first time since Clara's call, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. I placed my hand over Sophie's. "You remind me of him when he was young. Stubborn, but with a good heart." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what runs in the family, not just the bad things." The rain outside intensified, beating against the windows. But inside, there was a stillness, a fragile bond forming across the years that Clara and Victor had tried to sever. I whispered, almost to myself, "They thought they could silence me. They thought age made me weak, but now I'm not alone." Sophie squeezed my hand. "No, you're not. We'll solve this, I promise." And in that moment, sitting side by side in the dim light of my living room, the weight of betrayal didn't feel quite so crushing. A new chapter had begun, one that Clara and Victor could not control. The kitchen had always been my safe place. It was where David and I shared morning coffee, where our daughter once did her homework at the table. That night, though, the space turned into something else entirely. Sophie and I sat across from each other, the slip of paper between us, the yellow light of the overhead lamp pooling across the wood. She tapped her laptop with quick fingers. "Let's start with the obvious. Social Security numbers, anniversaries, addresses. Grandpa was too precise to leave something random." I nodded, pulling out a notebook and pen, my hand trembling as I wrote. For the first time since the Montblanc disappeared, I felt a strange energy building inside me, fear mixed with resolve. Sophie tilted her head. "What were his most important dates? Not just official ones, personal moments that defined his life." I inhaled slowly, then answered. "August 15th, our wedding day. July 14th, the night we met in Chicago. And November 2nd, the day his father died. He never forgot that." She typed them all in, trying each variation. Rejections flashed across the screen. She muttered under her breath, but not with defeat. "He left breadcrumbs. We just have to follow the trail." I watched her work. Her determination reminded me so much of David in his youth, hunched over his desk late into the night, solving problems no one else cared to understand. I whispered, "He used to tell me puzzles were the way he ordered the chaos of life." Sophie smiled faintly. "Maybe he wanted you to solve this puzzle now, with me." We scribbled possibilities on paper, our first address in Seattle, his employee ID number from the bank, even the license plate of our first car. None of them unlocked the code. The hours stretched, and yet the kitchen grew warmer with every word exchanged. At one point, Sophie looked up and caught me smiling, just a little. "That's the first time I've seen you smile since I came here," she said softly. I touched my lips, almost startled. "I suppose it feels good not to be fighting this battle alone." She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if Clara and Victor could somehow hear us through the walls. "They don't know about this paper, do they?" I shook my head. "And they never will. This is ours now." The moment hung heavy, but in it there was trust. She had crossed the invisible line Clara had drawn, stepping into my corner with no way back. I pointed at the numbers again. "What about combining them? David never liked single answers. He always layered his meaning." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Yes, patterns, sequences. If it's structured like an account, it might include location codes, personal identifiers, dates." She typed quickly, her screen filling with combinations. Failures stacked one after another, but neither of us moved from our chairs. We worked like soldiers on a quiet mission. At last, Sophie leaned back, exhaling sharply. "He was too clever to leave this wide open. But we're closer. I can feel it. Every wrong attempt narrows the field." I looked down at the paper again, tracing the faded ink with my finger. "David, what did you want me to find? And why did you hide it so deep inside something so small?" My words weren't just for Sophie. They were for the empty chair across from me where he once sat. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Sophie's keystrokes. Outside, the rain softened, as if even the city paused to listen. For a moment, I closed my eyes, gripping the pen Sophie had lent me. "You know," I said quietly, "Clara told me I was nothing but a poor widow, that my memories were worthless. But tonight, with you here, I feel more alive than I have in months." Sophie looked startled, then placed her hand over mine. "You're not worthless, and we're going to prove it. Grandpa wanted you to have answers. We'll keep trying until we find them." In that kitchen, beneath the yellow glow, I allowed myself to believe her. For the first time since the betrayal, the heaviness inside me lifted just enough for hope to breathe again. The breakthrough came late in the night. Sophie sat hunched over her laptop, the glow of the screen lighting her determined face. I scribbled notes beside her, my handwriting cramped from hours of failed attempts. Then she froze, her eyes widening. "Grandma, look at this. The letters aren't random. SS44457 links to a client file number from a law firm database. I traced it through cross-references. And CH08 from 15? That matches an old archive tag for a lawyer named James Carter. Do you recognize the name?" The moment she said it, something stirred in me. James Carter. Yes, I remembered his voice from long ago, the way David once called him the only lawyer I trust. They had met in their 20s, built their careers in parallel, and stayed friends through thick and thin. David never explained why they drifted apart later, but now the name resurfaced like a key rising from the depths. "Carter," I whispered. David trusted him. He must have left something with him. By morning, Sophie and I were on a bus headed downtown. Seattle's skyline rose gray and sharp against the clouds. The streets bustled with cars and hurried pedestrians. But for me, everything felt narrowed, focused. My fingers clutched the slip of paper in my coat pocket like a weapon. The office building was sleek glass and steel, a monument to wealth and law. Sophie pushed the door for me, her hand light but steady on my arm. We rode the elevator in silence, the numbers ticking upward, each ding tightening the knot in my stomach. On the 21st floor, we stepped into a quiet reception area. A plaque on the wall bore his name, James Carter and Associates. The receptionist, a young man in a dark suit, looked up politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said firmly. "But tell him Amanda Sullivan is here. He'll know why." The man hesitated but picked up the phone. Moments later, he gestured us through. "Mr. Carter will see you." Inside, James Carter looked older, his hair silver, his face marked by years of battles fought across courtrooms. He rose slowly from behind his oak desk, his eyes narrowing as they landed on me. "Amanda," he said, his voice low. "It has been a long time." I stepped forward and laid the slip of paper on his desk. David left this inside his pen. It led me here. For a long while he said nothing. He picked up the paper, studied the faded ink, then closed his eyes. A sigh escaped him, deep and heavy. "So it's finally time." My heart thudded. "Time for what, James? What did David prepare? Why did he keep me in the dark?" He looked at me then, his gaze sharp, almost pitying. "Amanda, David was a cautious man. He saw storms long before they reached the shore. He came to me years ago, long before his illness, and entrusted me with documents, accounts, protections. He wanted to shield you from greed, from betrayal. He feared what might happen if Clara or Victor ever took control." Sophie leaned forward, her voice urgent. "What kind of protections?" Carter opened a drawer and pulled out a heavy black folder. He placed it carefully on the desk between us. "This contains what David left behind, financial records, a video message, and legal instructions that were never meant to surface until you brought me that code." My throat tightened. "He planned all of this, even knowing I'd be left alone?" Carter nodded. "He told me you would find the strength when you needed it most. He trusted you." For the first time, I felt both fury and relief intertwining. Fury that David had hidden so much, relief that I was not losing my mind, that there truly was a plan behind the chaos. I placed my trembling hand on the folder. "Then open it. Show me what he left." Carter's eyes lingered on me, then softened. "Amanda, Once you see this, there is no going back. Are you certain? I straightened my shoulders. My voice was steady, sharp. They already think I'm weak. They already believe they can strip me of everything. I won't let them. Not anymore. He exhaled, a sound of resignation, and slid the folder toward me. The weight of it landed like thunder. Inside lay the first door David had unlocked, waiting for me to step through. James Carter's office grew impossibly quiet as he slid the heavy black folder toward me. My hands hesitated before touching it. My breath caught halfway between dread and anticipation. Sophie leaned forward, her face tense with curiosity. Carter pressed his palms together, his eyes solemn. "Open it," he said. I lifted the cover. Inside lay neatly bound documents, stamped, signed, and marked, with David's familiar handwriting in the margins. At the top, bold letters, "Trust Account Agreement." My vision blurred as I scanned the numbers printed beneath. A bank account, held offshore, in David's name. And the balance, my heart nearly stopped, was close to $2 million. I gasped, my voice trembling. $2 million? All this time? My hands shook so violently, I had to grip the folder to keep it from sliding off the desk. Sophie's mouth fell open. "Grandma, he left you a fortune." My chest tightened, not with relief, but with something closer to betrayal. He kept this from me? All those nights I stayed awake, worrying about bills, about losing the house, about the hospital debts. And he had this hidden away? My voice rose, cracking like ice under pressure. Carter raised a calming hand. "Amanda, listen. This was not selfishness. This was David's shield for you. He created the trust to ensure that no one, especially Clara and Victor, could touch it. He knew greed would circle you like vultures. He wanted this protected until the right moment." His words struck me, but the storm inside would not settle. I slammed my hand against the folder. "And the right moment is now? When I've nearly been broken? When my own daughter treats me like a burden and my son-in-law like prey?" Carter's gaze softened. "David anticipated exactly this. He told me you would be tested, Amanda, that you would discover your own strength only when forced to, and he left you something more." He reached into the folder again and drew out a flash drive. "Oh, a video message. He recorded it for you years ago." My throat closed. Sophie's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Do you want to watch it, Grandma?" I nodded, though my body trembled. Carter inserted the drive into his computer. The screen flickered, and then there he was. David. Older than the memory I clung to, but still him. His shoulders stooped slightly, his eyes tired but kind, his voice steady as it filled the room. "Amanda," he said, and my chest caved at the sound. "If you're seeing this, then I am gone, and you've found what I left behind." Tears welled instantly, but I forced myself to watch. He drew a breath, his expression shadowed with memories. "You know where I came from, a childhood of hunger and silence. I was 12 when I saw my father lose everything in the crash. I remember his face when he told us there would be no dinner. I remember the sound of my mother's sobs when the bank took the house. Those scars never leave." His voice wavered, then steadied again. "I swore I would never let that happen to you. Not to my family. That fear of losing it all, it shaped me. Every deal I made, every risk I took, was to build a wall around us. But I also knew what greed could do. I saw it in business partners, in strangers, in people we once trusted. And yes, Amanda, I feared I might see it in our own blood one day." I gasped, covering my mouth with both hands. David leaned closer to the camera, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "That is why I created this trust. Not to hide from you, but to guard you. I knew Clara would never understand. I knew Victor would see only numbers. But you, Amanda, you would see what it truly was. A lifeline, a shield, a chance to outlive their cruelty." My tears fell freely now, anger and grief twisted together until I could hardly breathe. "Why didn't you tell me, David? Why did you let me carry the weight alone?" I whispered to the screen. The video continued, his face softening. "I am sorry for the burden. I thought I was sparing you worry. Perhaps I was wrong. But if you are here now, it means you have endured more than I ever wanted for you. And it means you are strong enough to use what I left behind. Amanda, remember, this is not just money. It is a weapon, a shield. Use it wisely and protect yourself." The video cut to black. The silence that followed was unbearable. My sobs filled the room before I could stop them. My heart cracked with both fury and love. Sophie reached over, wrapping her arms around me. "He loved you, Grandma. He really did. This was his way of protecting you." I pressed my forehead into her shoulder, trembling. He should have trusted me. I would have stood by him through anything. But he carried it alone, and now I am the one left with his secrets. Carter folded his hands, his expression grave. "Amanda, you must understand. What David feared is happening now. Clara and Victor will not stop until they break you. But with this trust, and with the records he left me, you have the power to stop them first." I looked up, my face wet, my body drained but resolute. The storm inside me had found its focus. "Then I will, for David, for myself, and for every memory they tried to sell." His phone rang just after midnight. Its shrill sound cut through the silence of the house, jolting me from the chair where I had been reviewing Carter's folder again and again. My hand trembled as I reached for the receiver. A voice hissed on the other end, low and distorted, almost unrecognizable. "You are digging into things you should leave buried. Stop, or you will regret it." My breath caught. "Who is this?" The line clicked dead. I sat frozen, the receiver pressed to my ear, my pulse hammering. The threat was clear. They knew I was getting closer. Whoever made that call wanted me afraid, wanted me silent. But instead of fear, what rushed through my veins was fire. The next morning, Sophie arrived with her laptop and the files Carter had allowed us to copy. She set them on the table, eyes sharp. "Grandma, I stayed up late. I went through David's investigation notes. He hired a private detective. And guess what?" I leaned closer. "What did you find?" Sophie's voice lowered, steady but urgent. "Victor is drowning in debt. Gambling, unpaid loans, even fraud. He falsified documents to get credit. And worse, he's been preparing legal petitions. He wants the court to declare you incompetent so he can take control of your assets." My stomach twisted, but I clenched my jaw. "So that's his plan. Strip me of my dignity, my home, everything David built. He thinks I'll go quietly into the shadows." Sophie shook her head fiercely. "We won't let him. Grandpa left you these files for a reason. They're evidence. He must have known Victor would stoop this low." Before I could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. Sophie and I exchanged a glance, dread flickering in her eyes. I rose and opened it. There they were, Clara and Victor. Clara stood tall in her designer coat, her lips curved into a polished smile that never reached her eyes. Victor loomed beside her, smugness dripping from every gesture. "Mother," Clara cooed as she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "We were worried about you. You've been, well, distracted lately." Victor smirked, his eyes sweeping the room, lingering on the piles of papers on the table. "You shouldn't stress yourself. At your age, confusion sets in fast. Isn't that right, Amanda?" I steadied my breathing, forcing a tremble into my hands as I picked up one of the papers. My voice quavered deliberately. "I was just trying to understand some of David's old numbers. There was something about a small account he left behind. Nothing big. Just a little something." The effect was immediate. Victor's eyes sharpened, his whole body leaning forward like a predator catching scent of prey. "An account? What kind of account?" Clara's polished smile stretched wider, but her voice dripped with poison. "Mother, don't overexert yourself. Handling numbers, documents, it's too much for you now. Let us manage it for you. We'll take care of everything." I lowered my gaze, feigning confusion, but inside, I felt the cold steel of resolve. Their eagerness confirmed everything. They were circling like vultures, desperate to sink their claws into what David had left. Victor pressed, his voice impatient. "Where did you hear about this account? Did Carter mention it? You're not capable of dealing with offshore matters, Amanda. You could lose everything if you meddle." I met his stare, letting my eyes glisten as though I were on the verge of breaking. But behind that mask, a spark flared. "Perhaps you're right," I murmured. "Perhaps I'm too old for this." Clara patted my shoulder, her touch cold as ice. "Don't worry, Mother. We'll handle it. You just rest. Leave the hard parts to us." As they turned to leave, Sophie's hand brushed against mine under the table. She whispered so softly, only I could hear, "They're taking the bait." I nodded ever so slightly, my expression still blank to Clara and Victor. They thought I was frail, defeated, slipping into confusion. But in my silence, in the quiet fire of my eyes, a vow was written. The confrontation came 2 days later. Clara and Victor arrived not with soft words or false smiles this time, but with a man in a pressed suit carrying a leather briefcase. They didn't even ask to sit. They marched into my living room as if it were theirs. The lawyer set his case on the coffee table, his voice polished but cold. "Mrs. Sullivan," he began, "I've been asked to present a legal solution to prevent unnecessary complications. Given your age and recent difficulties, it would be prudent to sign this durable power of attorney. It grants Victor and Clara authority to handle your financial matters. It will protect you from mistakes that could cost you everything." I stared at the document he unfolded before me, line after line of legal language, and at the bottom, a blank space waiting for my signature. My pulse slowed, each beat deliberate. Clara leaned forward, her eyes glittering. "Mother, this is for your own good. You've been overwhelmed. It's time to let go and let us help." Victor added smoothly, "One signature, and you won't have to worry about bills, accounts, or lawyers ever again. We'll take care of it all." I felt Sophie stiffen beside me. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my silence hang heavy. My fingers brushed the edge of the paper, but I did not lift the pen. After a long pause, I pushed the document back across the table. "Not today," I said flatly. Clara's smile tightened, Victor's jaw clenched, but the lawyer merely gathered his papers and stood. "Consider it carefully, but I warn you, refusing could result in a court petition for guardianship. The law does not wait for sentiment." When they left me alone for a moment, supposedly to let me think it over, I slipped quietly down the hall, feigning fatigue. That's when I heard it. Clara's voice, sharp, cutting through the thin walls. "You fool!" she snapped at Victor. "You think a piece of paper will solve this? She'll never sign if we keep pushing like that." Victor muttered something low, but Clara's rage only sharpened. "Do you know why I am doing this? Why I have tolerated your endless failures, your debts, your gambling? Because I will never, do you hear me? Never go back to the poverty I was born into. I grew up hungry, humiliated, treated like dirt. I swore I'd bury that past so deep no one could ever drag me back there." Her voice cracked, but not with weakness, with fury. "I've stolen, I've forged signatures, I've moved money from accounts that weren't mine, all because I refused to be that little girl again. And now you, with your pathetic debts, are dragging me toward the same pit I crawled out of. I won't let it happen. I'll burn her life down. I'll bury Amanda myself if that's what it takes to keep us safe." Sophie had gone into the kitchen earlier, unnoticed, but I saw her now standing frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, breath shallow. She had heard everything. Victor tried to hush Clara, but she spat the words anyway, her voice dripping with venom. "She thinks she's strong, holding on to her precious memories, but I'll strip her bare. I'll make her sign, or I'll make the courts declare her unfit. And when it's done, she'll be nothing but a whisper in a nursing home bed." I pressed my back against the wall, the fury inside me burning hotter with every word. Sophie's gaze met mine in that moment, her face torn with shock and disbelief. For the first time she had seen her stepmother unmasked. I drew a long breath, my mind sharpening to a razor's edge. They thought I was powerless. They thought their secrets would never reach daylight. But Sophie had heard. And Sophie, unlike them, still carried conscience in her eyes. That day, Clara revealed not only her cruelty, but the wound that drove it. Her terror of hunger, of the poverty she once lived. It made her desperate, vicious, willing to destroy even her own mother to keep the shadows of her past from touching her again. As she raged in the next room, I whispered to myself, a vow colder than steel. You've shown your hand, Clara. They returned within 48 hours, as though the first attempt had not rattled me at all. Clara walked in with her head high, Victor just behind her, and again that same attorney with the leather briefcase. They didn't even bother with greetings this time. Papers hit the table like a judge's gavel. The lawyer's tone was clipped. Mrs. Sullivan, we need to finalize this today. Refusal at this point only invites a petition to the court. Guardianship hearings are public, costly, and humiliating. This document spares you all of that. Victor leaned forward, voice syrupy but edged with steel. Mother, do not drag this out. Sign the authorization and let us manage what you clearly cannot. Clara added, her voice sharp as glass. You have nothing to lose by trusting us, unless you want the courts declaring you incompetent in front of everyone. I sat still, hands folded on the table. My heartbeat was steady, my breathing controlled. I let their words circle the air, thick and suffocating, until the silence pressed back against them. Then I lifted my chin. I will not be signing, I said evenly. The lawyer arched a brow. Then, ma'am, you are forcing their hand. The courts... I cut him off, my voice calm but cutting. I will consult David's attorney, James Carter. He knows every detail of my affairs. If anything needs signing, it will be through him and no one else. The name landed like a blow. Clara's mask cracked for just a second, her lips parting in shock before she recovered. Victor stiffened, his knuckles whitening against the arm of the chair. You've been speaking with Carter? Clara's voice sharpened. Yes, I answered, my tone colder now, and he knows more than either of you would dare imagine. The air thickened, charged. Sophie stood silently in the doorway, her eyes darting between us, her presence grounding me. The lawyer cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. Mrs. I let their words circle the air, thick and suffocating, until the silence pressed back against them. Then I lifted my chin. I will not be signing, I said evenly. The lawyer arched a brow. Then, ma'am, you are forcing their hand. The courts... I cut him off, my voice calm but cutting. I will consult David's attorney, James Carter. He knows every detail of my affairs. If anything needs signing, it will be through him and no one else. The name landed like a blow. Clara's mask cracked for just a second, her lips parting in shock before she recovered. Victor stiffened, his knuckles whitening against the arm of the chair. You've been speaking with Carter? Clara's voice sharpened. Yes, I answered, my tone colder now, and he knows more than either of you would dare imagine. The air thickened, charged. Sophie stood silently in the doorway, her eyes darting between us, her presence grounding me. The lawyer cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. Mrs. Sullivan, with respect, if you involve outside counsel, this matter will escalate. Then let it escalate, I replied, my words steady. Better in daylight than in shadows. Victor slammed his hand against the table. You don't understand the damage you're doing. You're not capable of making these decisions. I turned to him slowly, my eyes narrowing. And yet, here I am, making one. I will not be stripped of my rights while breath still fills my lungs. Clara's voice rose, cracking under pressure. You think Carter will save you? He can't protect you from yourself. You are vulnerable, and we are your family. You should be grateful we're here to clean up your mess. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a razor whisper. No, Clara. You are here to carve me up and feed on what David left behind. But you underestimated me. You thought I was weak. You thought you could frighten me into handing you the knife. That was your mistake. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the attorney faltered, shuffling his papers with restless hands. Clara's face twisted, her polished veneer slipping. Victor muttered something under his breath, pacing near the window like a trapped animal. I sat straighter, letting the weight of my words settle into the room. I have nothing more to say. Leave my house. The next conversation will be between attorneys, not family. The lawyer gathered his documents, clearly unsettled. Clara and Victor lingered, their glares burning into me, but I did not flinch. When the door finally shut behind them, the silence in the house pulsed with the aftershock. Sophie exhaled shakily, stepping to my side. "Grandma," she whispered, awe in her voice, "you didn't even blink." I placed my hand gently over hers. They wanted me to crumble. Instead, I gave them my answer. This war will not be fought in shadows. If they want battle, they'll have it under the brightest light. Ames Carter had barely left my house when another name surfaced, one I recognized from David's notes: Thomas Chen. David had trusted very few people, and if Chen was among them, then I needed to hear what he had. We met in a dimly lit diner on the edge of Seattle, the kind of place where the blinds stayed half drawn and the smell of old coffee clung to the air. Thomas Chen was already there, his back to the wall, his suit plain but pressed, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Amanda," he said, his voice low, "David told me you might come one day. Sit." I slid into the booth, my hands folded tight in my lap. Sophie sat beside me, her expression wary but resolute. Chen pulled a small device from his pocket, a recorder, scuffed with use, and set it on the table. "This," he said, pressing play, "is why David hired me." The diner's hum faded beneath the voices that spilled from the recorder. Clara's tone was unmistakable, clipped and venomous. "We have to push her into a nursing home," she sneered. "It's the only way. Once she's declared incompetent, everything falls to us." Victor's laugh followed, cruel and hollow. "A senile old woman clutching at memories. Why should she keep the money? She doesn't even know what to do with it." The words sliced into me like knives. My throat tightened, my chest heaved, and before I could stop myself, tears spilled over. I pressed my fist against my mouth, but the sob broke free anyway. Sophie's hand gripped mine, her knuckles white. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice shaking with both fury and grief. Chen let the recording run a few moments longer, long enough for me to hear Clara's cold laugh again, then switched it off. The silence in the booth was suffocating. I wiped my eyes, forcing steadiness into my voice. He knew. David knew what they were capable of. Chen nodded grimly. He knew, and he planned. He told me Victor's greed would be his undoing, that Clara's hunger for control would blind her. He wanted me to watch them, to gather evidence, to hold until you were ready. From his briefcase, Chen pulled a sealed envelope, its edges yellowed with time. My name was written across it in David's hand. I stared at it, my fingers trembling as I reached. Breaking the seal felt like breaking open a part of my heart. Inside was a letter, his words etched with the same firmness he had spoken in life. "Amanda," it began, "if you hold this letter, then the mask has finally slipped. Clara and Victor's hunger is no longer hidden. I foresaw it. I prepared for it. Do not despair. Do not yield. I turned Victor's arrogance into his own snare. Every time he boasted of a scheme, I tracked it, invested against him, made him unknowingly build the very fund that now protects you. He became the architect of his own defeat." My vision blurred as I read, but I forced the words into memory. "You have a choice, Amanda. You may forgive, or you may let justice speak, but you must act for yourself, for us. I trust you to know the moment." The paper slipped from my hands, my tears falling onto the ink. For a long time I couldn't speak. Then I straightened, folding the letter carefully, my breath steadying with resolve. I looked at Thomas Chen, at Sophie, both watching me with eyes full of expectation. My voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. "Then the moment is now. They've threatened me, demeaned me, plotted to erase me. No more." I lifted my chin, steel in my voice. "Mr. Chen, proceed. Today." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of respect flashing in his gaze. "You're certain?" "I've never been more certain," I said. "David gave me the shield. You've given me the sword. I will not sit quietly while they destroy his memory, and me with it." The air around us thickened with the weight of the decision, but my heart had never felt clearer. That night, as I walked back into the cold Seattle air, the city lights sharp against the darkness, I knew the battle had shifted. They thought me fragile. They thought me lost. But from this moment forward, I was the one carrying the truth, and the truth was a weapon they could not escape. The morning after I met Thomas Chen, I sat in Carter's office with the black folder spread open before us. My hands no longer trembled. My voice was steady. "It's time, James. Release everything. Let them see what David built, and what he built against them." Carter studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "So be it." Within days, the papers were filed and the trust documents made public. Every clause David had drafted, every safeguard he had carved into stone, was suddenly no longer hidden. The most devastating one hit Clara and Victor like a blade. If they dared to petition the court, if they so much as tried to strip me of competency, every cent of David's trust would bypass them and go directly into the David Sullivan Scholarship Fund. A fund created in their son's name, one that would serve the community and generations of students, but leave Clara and Victor with nothing. Carter placed the documents on the table before them, his tone merciless. "This is what happens if you pursue guardianship. He left you no path to profit from her ruin. He saw you coming long before you arrived." Clara's face drained of color, her lips curling back in a snarl. "That old man! He trapped us, even from the grave." Victor's eyes darted across the pages, his breathing shallow. This can't be legal." "It's airtight," Carter replied. "And now it's public record." That was the first blow. The second came faster. Thomas Chen's evidence had already been handed over. Within 48 hours, agents from the FBI Financial Crimes Division knocked on Carter's door. They had tracked Victor's forged loan applications, his falsified business ledgers, his gambling debts laundered through shell accounts. All of it tied together, each thread leading straight to him. I was at home when the final act unfolded. A heavy knock rattled Clara and Victor's front door. Neighbors peered from porches as black sedans lined the street. 2 FBI agents and uniformed police officers stood at the threshold. "Victor Hall," one of them announced. "Federal warrant for fraud, forgery, and financial conspiracy. You need to come with us." The color drained from Victor's face. He stumbled back into the living room, collapsing into a chair. His hands shook violently as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Clara, in her silk robe, shrieked as though the walls themselves had betrayed her. "You can't do this! He's innocent! This is her fault!" She spun toward the window, toward my house across the street, her finger jabbing the air. "She did this! That old witch! She poisoned everything!" But the agents didn't flinch. They read her own charges: accessory, embezzlement, conspiracy. Her voice cracked into hysteria. "No, I will not go back to being nothing. Do you hear me? I will not go back!" Her screams echoed down the block as the agents forced her into the waiting car. I stood at my window, my face calm, my eyes unblinking. Sophie's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Outside, the neighbors gathered in clusters, whispers darting through the air. All this time, she was telling the truth. One elderly woman, who had once turned her back on me when Clara spread lies of dementia, crossed the street later that evening. Her eyes were heavy with shame. "Amanda, I believed her. I thought you were slipping away. I'm sorry." I simply nodded. Truth has a way of surfacing. The street that once felt heavy with suspicion now buzzed with a different current. Vindication, respect, even quiet admiration. Clara and Victor, once so proud, had been stripped bare before everyone. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without fear. The storm that had loomed so long was finally breaking apart. But I knew one thing: David's plan, Carter's loyalty, Chen's evidence. None of it would have mattered if I hadn't chosen to act, and I had. After the arrests, the noise of reporters, neighbors, and investigators slowly ebbed away. For the first time in years, my home felt quiet, not from loneliness, but from peace. I knew it was time to begin again. I sold the house David and I had shared. It was not out of bitterness, but necessity. Every wall there carried both love and betrayal, and I needed air that wasn't haunted by voices shouting in the night. I chose a modest apartment just outside downtown Seattle, close enough that I could walk to the library each morning. The place was small, but filled with light. Windows that opened toward trees, shelves ready to hold books, and a sturdy desk where the Montblanc rested at the center like an anchor. The scholarship was born soon after. Carter and I worked through the paperwork carefully, establishing the David Sullivan Scholarship Fund at the University of Washington. Its purpose was clear: to support students who came from nothing, the way David once had, to give them the stability and dignity he feared losing all his life. I insisted that Victor Jr. qualify for the program, though his parents would never touch a cent. In that way, David's bloodline still carried forward, but without feeding Clara and Victor's greed. When word spread, letters arrived from young people I had never met, thanking me for hope they didn't think they'd ever have. Each envelope I opened reminded me that pain, when reshaped, could become provision for someone else's tomorrow. Sophie was with me through all of it. She moved closer, spending nights at my new apartment when classes allowed. She helped me set up a computer I barely understood, showed me how to check emails from applicants, and reminded me to eat when my mind was buried in files. Slowly, she stopped calling me just Amanda. She began calling me Grandma. One evening, as the final details of Clara and Victor's trial were announced, Sophie and I sat at the table with the news on low. Clara had been sentenced to 10 years for fraud and embezzlement. Victor, more deeply tied to the schemes, faced 15. Their names, once spoken with pride in social circles, were now whispered with shame. Sophie shook her head, her voice hushed. I can't believe I ever defended them. I can't believe I called them family. I reached for her hand. Family isn't always the ones who share your blood. Sometimes it's the ones who choose to stand beside you when the world turns its back. She pressed her lips together, her eyes bright with unspoken emotion. Weeks later, as spring bled into summer, we walked along the lake where David and I used to sit on quiet evenings. The water was calm, the sunset spilling gold across its surface. I carried the Montblanc with me, its weight familiar in my hand. I stopped at a bench, turned to Sophie, and placed the pen gently into her palm. She looked at me, startled. Grandma, I can't. This is yours. It was his. I closed her fingers around it, my voice firm but soft. A pen is not only for writing, it is for choosing direction, for carrying thought into the world. David believed that, and now I believe it belongs with you. You're the one who will carry the story forward. Write wisely, Sophie. Write with courage. Her tears fell freely, her arms wrapping around me in silence. For the first time in years, I felt the circle close, not with loss, but with renewal. As the camera of memory might pull back, I pictured myself sitting on that bench by the lake. Sophie beside me, the pen glinting in the last light of day. And in my heart, David's voice still lingered. Voice over. He left me not only wealth, but a lesson. That even when we cannot see it, there is always a greater plan unfolding. One built not on fear, but on love, protection, and legacy. A plan that carries us beyond the storms into the calm. The sun sank lower, the sky deepening with color. I sat still, breathing in the quiet, knowing that justice had been done, that peace had returned, and that the story, our story, would not end with me.